Network Africa. The Democratic Republic of Congo says it's now Ebola-free after more than 40 days without a case. Ethiopia forces make major military gains in northern Tigray, march towards the regional capital, Mekelle. Plus, 5 people die in Mogadishu restaurant attack. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. We begin with some good news. The Democratic Republic of Congo says it's now Ebola-free after more than 40 days without a case. The latest outbreak of the deadly disease in the northwest of the country was its third in 2 years, but vaccines and treatment developed during previous epidemics now offer hope to patients. Since 2018, DR Congo has faced back-to-back Ebola outbreaks, some of them overlapping. At the start of June, several patients were diagnosed in Mbandaka, Equator's provincial capital, and 130 people went on to contract the virus, with 55 of them dying. The Mbandaka cases emerged as a different outbreak in the east of the country was coming to an end. More than 2,000 people died from the disease in the North Kivu and Ituri provinces over 2 years. It was the world's second biggest outbreak. Kenyan lawmakers say they want a helicopter on standby to evacuate them to well-equipped hospitals in case of an emergency. The demand follows the death of their colleague, Justice Murunga, last weekend at a hospital in his Matungu constituency in western Kenya. The lawmakers on Tuesday eulogized their deceased colleague and decried their lack of access to emergency services. Kenyan journalist Abi Agina joins us now for more on this story. Abi, how are Kenyans reacting to this latest demand from lawmakers?
Well, thank you so much. This particular development has left Kenyans in disarray. Majority saying the politicians are using this opportunity to push for their own selfish interests. And majority of Kenyans believe that what politicians need to be pursuing at this point in time is the fact that we need to improve our healthcare system, not to push for their own interests. It has received a lot of attention in terms of many homes, many facilities are claiming this is an outrageous demand by politicians.
Well, we understand, like you mentioned briefly, that the demand follows the death of their colleague, Justice Murunga. Tell us a bit more about him. How did he die?
Sorry, I missed your question. Kindly take it again.
Yeah, I was asking you to tell us a bit more about the deceased lawmaker, Justice Murunga. Tell us a bit more about him and how exactly did he die?
Well, the death of the Member of Parliament has been cited to be COVID-19 related. So far, we do understand that the family, that is the position the family has given to the press. Of course, there are quarters that say he had been ailing from other diseases, but so far, that is the major cause of his death. And the big question right now is the politicians are realizing that it is high time that we go back to the drawing board, because it has infiltrated into the national level, especially touching on the politicians who hold enormous influence in the country.
Yeah, are there any, you mentioned that it is suspected to be COVID-19. Are there any efforts ongoing to, trace anyone he might have been in contact with and, get them into isolation?
Well, the details remain very scanty, like I did mention, but we do understand that a number of politicians who were last with him have gone into self-quarantine just to ensure that they are keeping safe. But it remains very much unclear, really, in terms of the level of people he had interacted with, and the details continue to stream in, especially right now. The family has remained tightly guarded. Of course, they've also remained tight-lipped. They're not letting out much information. For now, it's more about speculation in terms of who really interacted with him. At the same time, as is the normal protocol, the Ministry of Health has, of course, advised that all protocols be observed when it comes to people who are close contact. Contact tracing is also underway in the circles with which he had interacted with.
All right, then, Kenyan journalist Abiagina, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on that situation in Kenya.
Thank you so much.
Moving on now, the Ethiopian government says that its forces have made major military gains in northern Tigray and are marching on the regional capital, Mekelle. The Tigrayan insurgents, however, say they are putting up resistance at another town, Alamata. Refugees from the region are continuing to pour into Sudan, giving harrowing accounts of bodies dismembered by explosions or people being hacked to death. Many people are also displaced within Tigray less than 2 weeks after war broke out.
Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed called on the public to join him in a 2-minute ceremony on Tuesday to honor the members of Ethiopian National Defense Force fighting against the Tigray Special Forces. In Addis Ababa, crowds of people took part in the ceremony, which included 1 minute of silence and 1 minute of applause. But not all Ethiopians are happy with the government's decision to invade Tigray.
And these people who are doing this, they are our brothers, we know. I don't want to like this. They have done their best. But how could they kill their own brother? And their own sisters. This is not our custom.
The Prime Minister also warned that the deadline for rebel northern forces to lay down arms had expired, paving the way for an advance on the Tigray region's capital in a 2-week conflict shaking the Horn of Africa. Africa's youngest leader and the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize winner, Abiy Ahmed, launched airstrikes and a ground offensive on November the 4th after accusing the local ruling party, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, of armed revolt. But Tigrayan leaders say Abiy, who comes from the largest ethnic group, the Oromo, has persecuted and purged them from government and security positions since taking office in 2018. Meanwhile, Tigrayan forces fired rockets into the neighboring nation of Eritrea last weekend, widening a conflict which has already killed hundreds of combatants and civilians and sent about 30,000 refugees into Sudan. The United Nations says a full-scale humanitarian crisis is unfolding.
The UN Refugee Agency is warning that a full-scale humanitarian crisis is unfolding as thousands of refugees flee ongoing fighting in Ethiopia's Tigray region each day to seek safety in eastern Sudan. This is an influx unseen over the last 2 decades in this part of Sudan.
The United Nations and governments across Africa and Europe have urged Prime Minister Abiy to embrace talks, and even the Nobel Committee, which awarded him the Peace Prize last year, has expressed concern in rare comment on a past laureate's actions. But the Prime Minister says he will only negotiate when the rule of law has been restored to Tigray.
Meanwhile, the United States says it's concerned by what it calls blatant attempts to cause regional instability by local forces in Ethiopia's Tigray region after they launched rocket attacks last weekend against neighboring Eritrea. Fighting continues between Ethiopian soldiers and Tigrayan forces amid increased worries about a growing humanitarian crisis. The rocket attacks on Eritrean capital, Asmara, were a sign of how the internal conflict in Ethiopia could spread to the rest of the Horn of Africa. Tigray's ruling party, Tigray People's Liberation Front, accuses the Eritrean government of working with Ethiopia's Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, to launch attacks against the state, but Eritrea denies the accusations. The U.S. says it admires Eritrea's restraints, which the State Department believes has helped prevent the further spreading of the conflict. To more security matters, the U.S. has imposed sanctions on two senior leaders of Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab, accused of responsibility in an attack on a military base in Kenya. One U.S. military service member and two contractors were killed in the January attack in Camp Simba on Manda Island. It was the first attack by Al-Shabaab on U.S. forces in Kenya. The State Department says it has designated Abdullahi Osman Mohammed and Malim Ayman as specially designated global terrorists. It says Mr. Mohammed is Al-Shabaab's senior explosives expert and leader of its media wing, while Mr. Ayman is responsible for planning the attack on Camp Simba. In the meantime, 5 people have died and 8 others wounded after a suicide bomber blew himself up in a restaurant near a police base in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. It's unclear who was behind the attack, but Al-Qaeda-allied Islamist group Al-Shabaab frequently carries out bombings in Mogadishu and elsewhere in Somalia as part of its campaign to topple the central government. The group wants to establish its own rule in the Horn of African country based on its own strict interpretation of Islam's Sharia law. The United Nations says gunfire has continued along the disputed buffer zone between Morocco and the area held by the pro-independence Polisario Front in Western Sahara this week. UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric adds that the peacekeeping mission in Western Sahara continues to receive reports of shots being fired during the night at various locations. Sidi Oumar, the Polisario's ambassador to the UN, says the actions of the Moroccan forces had reignited a war after 30 years of ceasefire. A flare-up started last Friday when Moroccan troops launched an operation to open a highway through the Western Sahara to Mauritania. A ceasefire agreement between Morocco and the Polisario Front has lasted since 1991, keeping both sides behind a 2,700-kilometer buffer zone with an estimated 7 million landmines. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has held phone talks with U.S. President-elect Joe Biden to discuss the strengthening of U.S.-Africa relations. The two leaders also talked about ways of overcoming the COVID-19 pandemic, as according to a statement from President Ramaphosa's office. President Ramaphosa, who is also the African Union chairperson, said he looked forward to a strong partnership between the U.S. and Africa. Many African leaders have congratulated Mr. Biden for his election win. Meanwhile, President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on BRICS members to unite and provide leadership at the 12th BRICS Leaders Summit, which was held in Russia on Tuesday. He says the summit comes at a time of global crisis and a time that calls for cooperation and dialogue between the nations of the world. This year's virtual summit was held under the theme BRICS Partnership for Global Stability, Shared Security and Innovative Growth.
As BRICS countries, we are called upon to unite, to work together, to demonstrate our collective will, and to provide leadership. This pandemic has taught us the necessity of strengthening health systems and being prepared for future emergencies of this nature and scale. It has shown us the importance of investing in science, technology, and innovation. Above all, it has taught us that international solidarity must pave the way to stability, security, and economic growth. Since restoring our economies to good health is a goal that is common to all of us, it is timely that we are undertaking a review of the BRICS Strategy for Economic Partnership 2025. We remain committed to achieving sustainable development in BRICS and to the creation of opportunities for all.
Still to come on the program. Malawian preacher Shepherd Bushiri and his wife Mary hand themselves over to police in their home country after skipping bail. Thanks for staying with us on the program. Years of conflict and the threat of al-Qaeda-linked Islamists battling to overthrow the government leave many Somalis dependent on aid. But an application called eShop is changing that dynamic. It's an initiative by the World Food Programme and is part of a global shift from giving out food to cash.
Muslima Abdurrahman, a Somali mother of 9, escaped death twice in the past 2 years while shopping for groceries in the city of Mogadishu, where Islamist insurgents regularly carry out suicide bombings on busy streets and markets. She traded the dangerous errand for online shopping earlier this year, thanks to the World Food Programme's Humanitarian e-commerce system in Somalia, part of its global shift from giving out food to cash. Originally conceived as a way to protect women in Somalia from security threats, be it bombings in the capital or harassment in a camp, it is also helping avoid large crowds at aid distribution sites during the COVID-19 pandemic.
It has become dangerous to go to the shops because we are afraid of catching the coronavirus. We are lucky to have this application. We enjoy online shopping. It also saves time and we get the food we want.
Her neighbor, Ilan Ado, who also uses the WFP app, says she uses the hours she saves to breastfeed her children, do chores, and rest.
I order food that I need for the day, such as rice or spaghetti. The delivery team brings the food to my house, and the shop owner withdraws the money from my card.
Though WFP launched eShop in 2018, it introduced home delivery in April, the month after COVID-19 hit Somalia.
The eShop is a system that, if it works in Somalia, it can work anywhere else. Somalia offers all the challenges that can actually be the testing ground for a system like this.
Hundreds of retailers sell on the app. Transactions are recorded to comply with the government tax system, and purchases are verified on delivery using biometrics.
Many years ago, when we were handing food, the people accept the food, and you could see in their body language how the dignity wasn't there. Because when you are receiving food, you are without having the opportunity of discuss or challenge, you don't have that strength. And you can see the body language of these beneficiaries have changed now tremendously. Because now with the cash-based assistance that we provide, they are the ones deciding where and what to buy.
$6 million in transactions and more than 51,000 deliveries have gone through the system. It operates in Mogadishu, including camps for people forced from their homes by violence, and in all Somalia's main towns.
Malawian preacher Shepherd Bushiri and his wife Mary have handed themselves over to police in their home country after skipping bail in South Africa. The couple turned themselves in at the capital Lilongwe this morning. Earlier this month, they were released on bail by a South African court after being charged with fraud and money laundering. Mr. Bushiri told his supporters on social media on Saturday that his decision to skip bail was because he had been receiving death threats. He also accused the South African authorities of not offering protection. South Africa has initiated the process of extraditing the couple and on Monday issued a warrant for their arrest. Let's get more on this story from our South African Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia. Betty, thanks so much for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you, Tanya.
What impact will Shepherd Bushiri and his wife turning themselves into the police in Malawi have on the extradition process?
Well, first I'll say it reduces a bit of pressure on the Malawian government to say we're not cooperating with this misdemeanor. But it also puts in process the response of the official response of the Malawian government, because Interpol Pretoria had requested for his extradition. But there is a process, even in line with the SADC, that's the Southern African Development Community, to which both countries belong, the treaty on extradition, which is binding on about 14 countries in SADC, which deals with the obligation to extradite or not unextraditable offenses. So now that he's handed himself, he's going to appear in court in Malawi, a magistrate's court, where you start what is called the committal proceedings, where they will look at the merits of some of the issues that he's raised and what next to do. And then probably later on at a higher court. But then again, Article 9 of that SADC treaty on extradition, of the protocol on extradition, Article 9 says that the requested state, if not precluded by the local laws, that's the laws within the country, may grant the request from the requesting country, that's South Africa in this case, provided that the person sought consents to his extradition before a competent authority for him to be extradited. I don't know if that will happen in this case, but he is seeking assurance that there will be no prejudice and that his safety and that of his wife will be granted by the government of South Africa for him to return, that he's not evading. But a lot of processes are already in place to sort of penalizing for what they've done, including another warrant of arrest and revoking of his permanent residence. There are also restrictions within the Malawian constitution, for those with, there's talk that he has a diplomatic passport, and people who use diplomatic passport, apart from the passports, Malawian passports they've already submitted to the South African authorities, those with diplomatic passport will not be surrendered except for treasonable offenses. I don't know if that will be invoked in this case, but the process is already on. They've handed themselves over and they will be appearing in court. I understand they've applied for bail at this point, but we don't know when next, what next will follow. But the process is in place for an official response from the Malawian government, to the request of South Africa.
All right, Betty, you'll have to keep our eyes on how all that plays out. Thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you so much.
And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shubowale.